And that's a short video from our partners and supporters. This time we have, I think we have a very timely speaker and a book to talk about. Our guest today is Zalmai. Hi, Zalmai, and thank you very much for your time. Just a few housekeeping rules for people. If you have, for our audience, if you have any questions, feel free to use Q&A box and we will convey the messages and questions to Zalmai. The reason, well, other than being an amazing photographer, one of the really important reasons why we're having and hosting Zalmai today is Zalmai is Afghan-born photographer who left Afghanistan in his teenage years back in the 80s after the Soviet invasion. And then he came back in 2001 after Taliban's were overthrown. And we are going to speak about his book, Dread and Dreams. I think it's super important to have a photographer who's, let's word, for lack of better word, at least I don't know it, a native photographer, someone who is coming from the country that he's left long ago because of the war and so on, and who finally came back after, well, 20 years almost, to photograph it. I think Afghanistan is in a particular situation because pretty much 90% of the pictures we know about Afghanistan were made by foreigners, including me. I photographed Afghanistan as well. And I also come from a country, Bosnia, which also was largely photographed by foreigners. So I think there's something special about it does something special to us, to photographers, when they see their country in other people's pictures. And in Zalmai's case, you basically grew up with seeing your country through the eyes of other people. Am I correct to say that?
Unfortunately, yes. Yes.
So what did that, so you left Afghanistan in 1980, right? You were what, 12, 13 years old? How old were you?
Almost 14.
14. And then you were out of the country for 20 years, right?
Yes.
Okay. So, but obviously you became photographer in the process, right? You were already a photographer when all that stuff, all the conflict and everything was happening in Afghanistan. So I'm just wondering, what this sort of seeing your own country from other people's perspective did to you as a photographer? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I want to just say a little bit before about the photography for me. Before I left Afghanistan at the age of the 14, I fell in love with the photography. And I wanted to become a photographer. And that was just before the war. And the war came and I had to leave and on the exile in Switzerland, where I studied photography, I became a photographer. When I left Afghanistan, I wanted to be a photographer. And of course, during my study, and I was looking all the pictures coming out of Afghanistan, and it was always bloody and always war and always, and that was not the Afghanistan I knew. And of course, I feel when we are from outside, and especially depending where we come from Europe or US or Japan, and we have already a background to see our object the way we want to see. And we are looking what we have, what is in our mind, but actually, most of the people don't really open their eyes as what is there, what we can take. No, I was most of the time disappointed to see just war pictures. And at some point, I do understand why, because the rest was not interesting for anyone when the Russian left Afghanistan. during 1980s, Afghanistan was very important for all the world. You know, Afghan are fighting Red Army, and they are hero. We were a hero of planet fighting against the Russian. But then, when the Russian left, and the international community said, "Okay, this is now your problem. You fix it. We leave." But the international community, we sent a lot of weapons in this country, and a lot of, and it was a vacuum what we had actually, and this year, in August this year. And for me was, I wanted to go to one day to go back in Afghanistan, and I didn't know when what would be possible. Same time, just before, I had just the opportunity to go with Northern Islands with Masood from the north. And again, that was not exactly my point to see this. And of course, 9/11 happened, and suddenly all the planet is looking Afghanistan. And of course, at that time, I was in New York. I was working as a freelance photographer for different magazine, and Newsweek sent me there. And it was very strange. I was in Tajikistan on the way to Afghanistan. We had a convoy of more than 500 journalists, media around the world. We are all going to Afghanistan. And I remember perfectly this image of this convoy. And I was saying, where you have been in the last 20 years? Why we have to go now? Why we cannot follow up the story and change something? But again, when we arrive there, everybody's running to find Afghan fighters, Taliban fighters, and Americans. And that was kind of, but for me was more about something when I arrived from Tajikistan to Afghanistan, and the border control was a small office, and I started speaking Farsi. The guy he couldn't even believe, like, "Oh, you're Afghan, you're coming back?" And was like, "Oh, we are proud of you. What, you didn't forget about Afghanistan and this." And suddenly I felt, wow, this is a place I can tell some story different than other people. And of course, they received me well, and I started doing my work.
Just to answer part of your question, but I'm going to start sharing some of the pictures from the book so people can enjoy some of this imagery. But I think the reason why, the part of the answer to why photographers and journalists flock to the certain areas and countries and places is because most of us are largely reactionary, so to speak. That's how journalists and photographers usually think. We react to events, and I think it's actually wrong to keep only that sort of motivation to keep reacting to events. I think we should be more proactive, if that's the word. But I think that's part of our craft and our business. You know, people just follow the news and react and flock to certain countries. So I think that's part of the reason why journalists behave in such way. But I'm just curious before we move on. So when you left, I assume you still had family in Afghanistan, right? I assume you left with your parents and so on, but you still had family, extended family in Afghanistan. Are they still there?
It's actually almost all of my family left, because at that time we were kind of, I can say, middle class of this time, and the Russian didn't want, especially my father was in the government, and they didn't like these people, you know. No, I mean, I left. Yes. How I can say it? I don't have any more family there. No. And especially when I went back in 2001, my father was in Switzerland, and he told me, "You want probably we have still some very extended family," and he was worried about me to going there. And he said, "If you want, I can find someone to contact and can watch for you." And I remember perfectly. I said to my father, and I said, "Dad, I want to see my Afghanistan. I don't want to see the Afghanistan of my family, and I don't want to see Afghanistan of. I want to see my as a professional photographer, and I don't want to be conditioned of anything. Just be clean the way I want to see. And he said, "Okay, that's your choice. Good luck."
So, what was the first impression? I'm really curious. How does it feel? I was refugee as well, but only for like a year and a half. So I just wonder, how is it? I mean, what was the first impression when you came back? You know, after you left a kid and you came back a grown man. I'm just curious, what was the first impression?
The first impression, it was in the north of Afghanistan and the countryside. And what I remember when I was a child, I didn't know about the countryside of Afghanistan. And I see just the big city, my family, and we were not really traveling. We went maybe to Herat and Mazar, but it was something very special. Before that, I traveled a lot in Africa and South America for my work. And then I arrived in this country. Is like, this is a country I can talk, I can, but I don't feel it's my country. Was unknown, all this behave of the countryside for me. But I found myself in a country I didn't know much, but I could talk and I could connect very quickly. But it was very strange and very unknown, this first contact. When I arrived in Kabul, that was different because I had memories and I had a lot of, but the countryside was very different than I thought. But I was well received, and suddenly I look at the eyes of this man, and he looked at me, and suddenly I was, of course, scared what's going to happen. And as a being Afghan, I'm going to be caught by the Taliban, or I don't know, Northern Islands, what going to think about me because I left, I didn't do anything for the country, but suddenly they look at like, oh, welcome back, and thank you for coming back. And it was very powerful and strange at that time for me, yes. But it was unknown, it was a strange country for me, yes.
So the images I'm just going to browse quickly and then we maybe can talk about particular images. So this was taken in the period from what, 2001 until the book was published in 2015, if I'm not mistaken, right?
No, I mean, this particular work, I started in 2008 until 2013. But before that, I had another book and I was working very different about Afghanistan. It was more about the hope of Afghanistan. And suddenly in 2006, 2007, start everything changing. And I felt like, okay, this is a time. And I was based between New York, Geneva, and Kabul for almost 10 years. And I was doing a kind of a round trip, and I was working a lot with the UN. I was working with the Human Rights Watch and also with the media. But the problem for me was nobody was really looking what is Afghanistan really, and everybody was coming. All my colleagues, all my friends also. We are doing just embedded, okay, with American, with British, or whatever. But I felt like, do you want to tell the story of Afghanistan and you're using the military? And I think. And I told them, like, the military use you, and you think you are free of doing things, but they are not going to say, don't do this, but they were never going to show you something. And that is very controlled. And inside of this controlled environment, you feel free, but you cannot tell the impact of a war on a population through a military. And that was something and of course, I was embedded because this is part of the story, and I could not tell Afghan story without going with the soldiers. But in the same time, that was not really my point of, if you look all the book, I think I'm talking about war in Afghanistan, but you don't see any dead body in my book, except one, and he was. But my point is,
I'm going to share now the book. Sorry, go on.
No. I mean, telling the story about the war is not always important. You must have so much dead body, and I risked my life, and I was almost blew up. I think everybody knows. Right now, we know what caused the war on a population, but why we are searching always this James Bond or Indiana Jones style behave, and that is something I think put you a lot of distance between you and your subject. For me, I can say I wanted to be embedded with the people, not with the military. And for me, it was very difficult. I went a lot of part of Afghanistan, and when was possible. And each time I try to go a little bit more. What is those people? Like this picture you show me, like this one, yes. This is a picture you can make it 500 years ago. It's the same. And next picture is almost kind of same composition. And why didn't work this, what we did in Afghanistan? Because this is the difference totally between this and that. And we try to combine this and try to make a piece without all this middle, what's going to happen. And because of that, it didn't happen. But that is, I think that these two pictures for me give you good way of seeing what is happening and why it didn't work in Afghanistan. And 2000, yes, go ahead.
Can I just jump in? I think you mentioned embedding. I think the whole system of being embedded with the military caused a huge damage to journalism. That's my humble opinion. Absolutely. I know that in many situations, in many, let's say, periods in Iraq and Afghanistan, that was the only way that you could work because it was so dangerous and because unlike before when journalists were collateral damage in violence in Afghanistan, contemporary war, and in Iraq, journalists, became, I hate to say it, they were considered legitimate target and they were targeted. So I can understand that because of the dangers, it was the way to do it. But I think it caused a huge damage to integrity of journalists. That's one thing. And I also think, I'm going to be candid here, but I think a lot of journalists are people who are too afraid to join the army professionally, but they still wanted to experience, part of adrenaline rush and the thrill for action. So I think there is there's a dominant macho culture in our business, and I think that's partially the reason why so many photographers are chasing the violent graphic imagery. And also because I think they, like you say, like James Bond kind of experiences. And I also, because ultimately they think that graphic imagery is stronger, has more impact and so on. So, which I totally disagree with, by the way. So, and I totally agree, dead bodies don't really speak. And I also try as much as possible to avoid graphic imagery in my work, but it's not always possible.
Yeah, right? No. I mean, I think the imagery we see from the war, of course, we have to do. For myself, I think it's a different kind of photographer. Some photographer they like just to go in the war zone and they cannot do anything else. They are waiting for the next one. But for me, I'm not a war photographer, and the war come in my work. It's in my country, and I wish I was going back to Afghanistan, not taking picture of this and taking picture of something else. But unfortunately, the suffering is there, the war is there, and you cannot close your eyes and tell something else. But I think we probably since 500 years, we are looking all the planet in the same way, and the Western way of seeing the North, the East, the West. And we, right now for example, I'm in Cambodia, and I am working on a project, and I had some course, and I'm training some photographer here, because I believe when the people are from the country, they can tell better story than if we go from the way we see the planet, and how we can change this point of view we have since 500 years. How you can do it today is photography is kind of accessible for many people. Before, the camera was expensive, processing and this, but today, even a tuk-tuk driver here, he takes pictures, he has two phone in his pocket. That is, photography is more democratized, and that is good for the general. But now I think we have to go a little bit higher about the quality of what people see. People cannot, I think most of our information come from our eyes. All the people know how to see, but today we have 1 billion or 2 billion pictures produced every day, and we are consuming. It's good for the photography, but our job as a professional, we have to show what is a good photography, and what is the meaning of this, what is the power of this, how we can do it. It's right now I feel we are on confusion time. I think our value is falling, and the value of no photographer going up, and we have to somehow to adjust this, because then we have fake information, fake news, and all this manipulation we are a very tricky situation right now, and I hope we are strong enough to cross this and keep the integrity of the photography or journalism or the storytelling. You know, we are going all kind of direction today for me, and what I can do with my photography, with trying to a little bit to support some local photographer, I do what I can, but I feel it's a very important time.
I totally agree, but here's my sort of beef with our business. I work a lot in educational sort of department, and we do a lot of training, and we are as Seven Foundation, as Seven Academy, we are focused on countries that are outside of G20 group and so on. But even like today, when you look at, for example, the most recent events in Afghanistan, okay. The withdrawal of the coalition forces, the Taliban's overtaking the country, overrunning the country to be precise. Even today, majority of the pictures we see from this last series of events were still taken and again taken by foreigners. Now, I have nothing against foreigners, don't get me wrong, but it's kind of depressing that we have this super cheap tool, right? The phones, everyone has it. Even in the poorest countries, everyone has access to internet, and yet somehow I have a feeling that not enough opportunities are given to people coming from places, well, like Bosnia, like Afghanistan, like Myanmar. Myanmar is probably a specific case that doesn't really apply. But anyway, I'm really troubled by the fact that still majority of images that we see in the mainstream media, obviously, are done by foreigners. And I think I don't see that changing very soon. And that's quite depressing for me, at least.
Yeah, but and also who is consuming this? This is the people, I understand we are not finished with this, but I feel if we are conscious of this and we can do something one day, would be important to not looking as I said before, we are just looking in the same way and we are consuming exactly the same way. And most of the time, what is the problem of then is misunderstanding, and then what happened in Afghanistan? We went to Afghanistan for 20 years to 3 trillion, I think, and suddenly few thousand people take over with a motorbike and one Kalashnikov. I mean, try to understand what we are doing. And I think as a photographer or journalist, we have responsibility. We have huge responsibility. We are the eyes of other people. We cannot just be focused on one thing, and this is made Afghanistan, and this is Afghan people. It's our job and our colleague and our around us, but the impact of our work is much more than our friends and our network. And for me, I think this is we have to be very. Because of that, I did this decision to make this book, because this is a place, a book for me. I'm free what I want to do. This is my space. I'm not dealing with the editor and US media or European media. And I was in Afghanistan working about the war on terror about Afghans. And I went to New York and they were saying like, well, we don't care about the Afghan people. You don't have any things embedded in Kandahar and this. And I said, if you want to see what's happening, this is the story of Afghanistan. This is another story of Afghanistan, but we have to balance it to try to understand. But I never published it because I was not part of this media or way of seeing. And why I make decision, because of that, I made my decision to make a book. And the book, you are totally free to express yourself the way you want. And I like the exhibition also because I have a control. When I work for a newspaper, a magazine, an NGO, we have always to adjust ourselves to what they want from us. And I feel we are just one element of very big machine. We feel I'm independent and I'm going to do this. But after all, I think all work is manipulate again. And for me, a book was a solution for me to try to tell the story. And if you see the book, I don't have caption, I don't have location, because
why is that?
Because I don't. It's about Afghanistan and it's about what is happening there. When you put information, then you give a lot of, how I can say, a lot of tools to see your picture. But for me, I believe more on a photography and the way you compose it. Why, like this book is around 60 pictures, 70 pictures, but it's 4 years of work. You choose one by one, and why. For me, when you touch someone will say, I like your picture, but I don't know why. I think this is the best compliment for me, because for me, I touch somewhere something very deep, a subconscious level. That's I'm interested. I'm not interested at all before that. And people come to see the book or exhibition, and they go back home, and 1 or 2 pictures stay with them for a few days, thinking, and maybe this can change something. That is my point. It's not about. I'm not recording the story. I'm not recording the history. I mean, I'm not trying to. Actually, I'm just a photographer. I'm not a journalist, and I try to just. Photography can tell. For me, I'm in touch with the photography a lot, and I think people can understand, can feel it. And that is one of the reasons I'm interested. This is my sixth book I did. Yeah.
Well, I think certainly photography works better as you said, as something that's going to touch on, some subconscious level, rather
Yes.
than explaining things. Photography is not very good at explaining things, no matter how good we are. So as a photographer, so I think it's brave to tell such a complex story, such as Afghanistan. I mean, all stories are complex, but Afghanistan is particularly complex country, and I think it's really brave move to basically create a book without much context in the sense of the words. And I do agree with you that whenever we work for publication, whatever we do, our work is being put in a context that we couldn't have imagined as photographers, right? So, your pictures or my pictures might end up between 2 pages of advertising for, a new antidepressant or sunblock. And I think that's really, I totally agree with you. And I suffer from same illness, so to speak, when I see my images in the publications. So yes, indeed, books are a space of freedom where you can do things the way you wanted. But I have to say, it's bold move to omit text from the book. I think that's really bold, but I think it works very well in your case, because how would I say, it makes it somewhat less pretentious. I don't know if that's the right word, because as you know, photographers, when they make books, sometimes they try to do too much. Now I'm gonna tell you the story. It's
And I make a book about it.
Exactly. So I think it's really brave. You said but you did one more book on Afghanistan, right?
Yeah.
But you did it after this, right? Or before this one?
Before this
one. Okay.
Yes.
So when was the last time you were in Afghanistan?
The last time I was in 2013.
Oh, okay. And so can you, like, for those who don't know or who didn't follow, like how this whole thing, the most recent events, now this has nothing to do with photography, but just as, insight from someone who's worked in a country for so long, how did country collapse so quickly? That's like, this is the fastest collapse of country in history, I would say, almost, right?
Yes.
The latest dissolution, so to speak. So I'm curious, how did that happen? I mean, like,
essentially, I think this is a big question for everyone, including myself. I cannot understand until now really what happened. I think it was something really okay. Maybe I can say it, and why collapse everything? Because of this negotiation in Doha last year, when Mr. Trump tried to make a deal as a dealer, and I think he sold the country.
But sold it for what? What did he sell it for?
Sold it for leaving and not having any more dead soldier in Afghanistan. For him was just a small deal, but behind of this deal is a country, is 30 million people, and energy investing, and so many Americans die for what? You have to ask this question: why? And then, of course, when you see what happened, U.S. create Afghan army with supply chain as American, but the supplier left. But how are you gonna make when you're a soldier in the front and you cannot have food and munition and you can resist for 1 week, but the supply chain is not working, and you're gonna die, and you give up and you go and say, no, I'm not fighting. And it's happened like this. Sincerely, I cannot believe how even I had a discussion with one of my friends and said, okay, all the provinces falling one by other one. And I was like, Kabul is not going to fall. If Kabul is going to fall, it's going to be a shame for all the planet. What is happening? How we can accept that? And in the other side, the Americans or the international community or NATO, 52 different countries, they send their armed force in Afghanistan, and they try to do a war inside of small villages and the countryside without seeing what was the real problem of where it come from. Of course, if some of you know the role of Pakistan, what is and how they train all those people. Now they are saying Taliban is around 80,000, 60,000, 80,000. Suddenly they appear all over Afghanistan simultaneously. Who organized this? Who can plan this? This is not the soldier. He never been to school or he went to madrasa school. No, this is much bigger organization, and I feel like some kind of deal was done before with Americans, Pakistanis, whatever, to give up because we don't know. I don't know. Or I can say also the president, Ashraf Ghani, the last speech he gave, he said, I'm going to do something. You will understand in 3 months, 6 months. And then he left. And he said, I don't want anymore the Afghan people going to have to fight. And I think the international community or Americans wanted this fight continue because we have a presence in Afghanistan and this and this and that. But I'm just thinking loud. It's crazy what I'm saying, but the president left, and just before that, he prepared all the government in Afghanistan. They are digitalized now. Everything, finance, school, army, everything. And few months ago, he took out of the few billion of Afghanistan money and put it outside of the country. I think he had this plan to, I'm gonna give the key for the Taliban, but I know because he's an economist before everything, and it's gonna collapse anyway. And what is my point? I think the international community right now playing this game. Okay, we are not gonna recognize this. We are not gonna support them financially. They're gonna collapse. It's how they're gonna collapse. All Afghan themselves, they're gonna clean up, but a very high price because the work, the army couldn't do it with all forces for last 20 years with 3 trillion. Now we are expecting the ordinary Afghan do it.
So what is, sorry, I'm just going to switch camera off for a minute. So what is next in pipeline for Afghanistan? Now, this again has nothing to do with photography, but I'm just curious as a concerned citizen of the world, what's next in the pipeline for Afghanistan? If you could, an honest assessment, what is it? I mean, we're already seeing, this new terrorist, whatever group coming up in Afghanistan, bombing Talibans and so on. So what's going to happen? I'm just curious.
Essentially, it's very difficult, but this is a little bit lost chance. If we want to do something, we have to do it now. I don't know what we have to do, but if we don't do it, I think we have to go back by a force again in a few months or few years, because the job is not done. That's all. We left middle of. For me, Afghanistan was like a injured body, and we had doctors around, and everybody. Afghanistan was an emergency room, and everybody trying to help to save this Afghanistan. And suddenly the doctor, the nurse, everybody left. And how you can survive. No, I think the Afghanistan is going to be is going to suffer even more now because the international community, they gave so much without any result, and the Taliban take over. They don't know how to run a country. Economic wise, it's not going to working. Some people say yes, Afghanistan they can produce opium drugs, but if you look at the numbers, you cannot run a country with 2.5 billion. This is the money drug from UN. They're saying it's not a lot, and the other saying, oh, maybe the Chinese gonna help them because, but the Chinese they are not helping. They like win-win right now. They don't see a solution win-win with the Taliban because they don't know what's gonna happen. Probably they're gonna help few $100 million for this and for that, but they are not gonna help for rebuilding a country because it's not secure, it's not sure, which means for me, which means this Taliban gonna collapse. And what I think the Afghan people gonna get rid of them.
Okay. Now, just to go back to
my way of seeing, but I don't know.
I agree with pretty much everything you said. Just to go back to the books, I ask everyone, here we are in digital age where everything is on our screens. Why do we make books? Why do you make books? Why don't just make this book digital, to sell it as an ebook? But why make these expensive, terribly, hard to make objects? This one was printed in China. It doesn't really matter, but I'm just saying this complicated. Why bother going through this expensive, long, painful, complicated process when you can just put it up on the screen? So why do you make books?
I mean, before the screen, we had books, and as a young photographer, I was impressed by a book because it's an object you can touch it, you can carry with you, you can look at any time. The quality of the printing. By the way, this book was printed in Italy. That was I don't know what is wrong with the. No, it's in Italy.
Still Chinese print, but Chinese print pretty well, anyways.
Yeah. Now because digital, they just apply numbers. Before was interpretation. Italian, they knew exactly how the ink react with this paper, and I did the same thing, and I choose the paper. I mean, we still buying a Picasso for $150 million. I mean, why we buy this? Because we can have it digital. We can. It's part of our culture. It's part of our stories, and having a book. It's for me is more than just seeing a picture on the screen, and it's almost irreal. It's not real. It's digital. You can turn it off or turn it on. A book, you cannot do this. You cannot. You can close it and open it. But I mean, we are in the generation. I think my nephew, they are like 18 years old, 19. They don't understand the book because they don't even have time to look at. But again, we are in a very complicated position about the photography, and young generation, they want to see different way. They want to see VR. They want to see some whole other way. But for me, a book has much more power than seeing something on the screen.
I agree. I think the tactile experience cannot be replaced with a touch screen. That's it.
Yes.
And a book also has this monumental aspect, regardless to the size and shape of the book, but it has this almost like monumental aspect and adds value to the content. Just a final word from you. We get this asked a lot, like, how do I make a book? And so on, all those various questions from photographers. So do you have like a final word of wisdom or advice on making books? It can be anything from fundraising to, printing, but anything, like any final words of wisdom for bookmaking.
But I think, first of all, you have to ask question why you make a book, and what, especially for me, for the book, it come by itself. In the beginning, you start working on something, it's not for a magazine, it's not a small things, but I think my advice is for a person is just you have to believe, and you have to be sure it's worth it to put so much energy on something. It's, how I can say, is worth it. For each person is very personal. For me, I think you have to believe what are you doing is the most important things. Fundraising, publisher, those things come by itself. If something strong comes from you, people can see it. But it must come from deep inside of you what you're trying to do. It's not, a book is not just a publication or a flyer or something. It's much more than that. I think, yes, you have to believe what are you doing and is worth it. And then the power is going to come by itself. For me, nobody gave me the financial support or anything about this book. I took everything on my shoulder. I was shooting this in Kabul and everywhere without knowing exactly, but I knew I'm trying to say something. First, you have to feel it, and then, okay, you can transform it in a book.
And before we let you go, so you are now in Asia, right?
Yes.
In Cambodia, right?
Yes.
So you said earlier you're stuck there. Is that because of COVID or because of your project?
Actually, both.
Okay, fair enough.
Actually, yeah.
Can you share with us what are you working on?
Yes, I'm working since almost 2 years on a photography project about Tonle Sap Lake. It's one of the biggest lake in Southeast Asia, and it's dying because of global warming and because of construction of the dam on the Mekong. And it's a huge problem here. It's concerned about 1.5 million people. And I focus on one part of this lake, and it's a very special project. I took picture for 1 year, and then I went back and I make a show for the people there. I didn't invite anyone else because it was part of my I take all the time. I want to give back some. I want to give back. And it was quite a good experience. And then it became a little bit more a movie project. And right now I'm working on a movie project. It's very strange. It's about the lake, about a clinic, flooding clinic. They're helping me to go there to do this, and about photography. It probably is going to be almost 1 hour movie about photography. It's very it's going to be public in few months. Right now I'm editing the film. Yes.
Thank you very much, Zalmai, for your time, and thanks everyone for staying with us. I'm just gonna remind everyone of what we have lined up on our sorry, let me just share it on our 7 Insider. I'm sure you have, there's something for everyone. We're gonna have another book club next week. Then there is another presentation on representing refugees and telling the story of migrants. And then obviously the session with Ilvi for questions on photography. So make sure to sign up. And once again, thanks to our partners, Photo Wings. Zalmai, thank you very much for this.
Thank you very much.
Stay safe, everyone. You will also be able to see this recorded. And everyone, stay safe, and thanks for joining us. Thank you. Take care.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye-bye.